My neighbor knocked on the door at 5 a.m. Your wife is making your favorite dish for dinner today, as a surprise. Don't eat it. Make an excuse, just trust me. I asked why. He looked terrified and said, You'll understand by noon. At 11:30 I got a call from the police. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my 64 years of life had prepared me for what happened that cold February morning. The banging on my front door at 5 a.m. wasn't gentle. It was desperate, frantic, the kind of knocking that makes your heart race before you're even fully awake. I stumbled out of bed, my joints protesting after 35 years of working construction before retirement. Ashley was still sleeping, her graying hair spread across the pillow, completely undisturbed by the commotion. She'd always been a heavy sleeper. I grabbed my robe and shuffled to the front door, wondering what kind of emergency could bring someone to our doorstep at this ungodly hour. When I opened the door, Tom Richardson stood there in his pajamas and winter coat, his face pale and drawn. Tom lived next door, and we'd exchanged pleasantries over the fence for the past 3 years since he moved in. But we weren't close. He was a quiet man, maybe in his early 70s, who kept to himself and tended his garden with almost obsessive precision. Bruce, he said, his voice shaking. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. I squinted at him, still trying to wake up. Tom, what's going on? Is everything okay? He glanced nervously toward my house, then grabbed my arm. Not here. Can you step outside? Something in his tone made me comply. I followed him onto the front porch, closing the door softly behind me. The February air bit through my thin robe, but Tom's expression told me this wasn't about my comfort. Bruce, this is going to sound insane, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. He paused, running a trembling hand through his thinning hair. Your wife is planning to make your favorite dinner tonight. She's calling it a surprise. I stared at him, confused. Okay, and that's a problem because? Don't eat it. His words came out sharp and desperate. Whatever excuse you need to make, don't eat that food. Please, just trust me on this. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Tom, what the hell are you talking about? Why would I not eat dinner that my wife cooked? He looked around frantically, as if someone might be listening. I can't explain it all right now, but your life depends on it. Make an excuse. Say you're sick. Say you ate a big lunch. I don't care what you tell her. Just don't eat what she prepares tonight. My mind was reeling. This was Ashley we were talking about. My wife of 35 years. The woman who'd stood by me through my father's death, my mother's long illness, the lean years when construction work was scarce. The woman who'd raised our 3 children with patience and love. Tom, you're scaring me. If you know something about my wife, you need to tell me what it is. He shook his head vigorously. I can't. Not yet. But Bruce, I swear to you, by noon today you will understand why I'm asking this of you. The way he said it sent ice through my veins. There was something in his eyes, a knowledge that terrified him. Whatever Tom knew, it was eating him alive. Is Ashley in some kind of trouble? I asked. Just promise me, he insisted, gripping my shoulder. Promise me you won't eat that dinner tonight. I looked at this man I barely knew, standing in his pajamas in the freezing cold, begging me not to eat a meal my wife hadn't even started cooking yet. Everything about the situation screamed madness, but the terror in Tom's eyes was real. Okay, I heard myself say. I promise. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. I know how this sounds, Bruce. I know you think I've lost my mind, but by noon you'll understand. He turned and hurried back to his house, leaving me standing on my porch in the bitter cold, my mind spinning with questions. I went back inside, my hands shaking as I closed the door. Ashley was still asleep, looking peaceful and innocent in the dim light filtering through our bedroom curtains. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window toward Tom's house. What could he possibly know about Ashley that would make him risk looking like a lunatic to warn me? We'd been married for 35 years. I knew this woman better than I knew myself. Or did I? As the morning progressed, I found myself watching Ashley with new eyes. She woke up around 7:30, as she always did, and padded into the kitchen in her fuzzy slippers. Morning, honey, she said, kissing my cheek. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said, which was true enough. She moved around the kitchen with a familiar efficiency, making her toast and tea. Everything seemed normal, but Tom's words echoed in my head. I studied her face, looking for signs of something, anything that might explain his warning. "I was thinking," Ashley said, buttering her toast, "maybe I'll make that beef stew you love so much tonight. The one with the carrots and potatoes you always rave about." My blood turned to ice. She was smiling at me, the same warm smile I'd seen thousands of times over the decades, but suddenly it felt different. Wrong. "That sounds great," I managed to say. "It'll be a nice surprise for you. I haven't made it in months." "A surprise?" The exact word Tom had used. The rest of the morning crawled by like torture. I watched Ashley go about her usual routine, but everything felt sinister now. When she left for the grocery store around 10 a.m., I noticed she was gone longer than usual. When she came back with bags of ingredients, I found myself wondering what else might be in those bags. "Going to start the stew. Early so it has time to really cook down," she announced, unpacking groceries. "You know how you like it when the meat just falls apart." I nodded and retreated to my recliner, but I couldn't concentrate on the television. Every sound from the kitchen made me jump: the chopping of vegetables, the sizzling of meat, the bubbling of the pot. Sounds I'd heard Ashley make thousands of times before, but now they filled me with dread. At 11:25, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, a crisp, professional voice said, "Mr. Bruce Morrison?" "Yes, this is Bruce. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Metro Police Department. Sir, I need to inform you that your wife, Ashley Morrison, was arrested this morning on charges of attempted murder." The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. I scrambled to pick up the phone, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it again. "What did you just say?" "Mr. Morrison, I know this is shocking news. Your wife was taken into custody approximately 30 minutes ago. We need you to come down to the station as soon as possible." My legs gave out and I collapsed into my recliner. The living room spun around me like I was on some hellish carnival ride. "There has to be a mistake. Ashley would never hurt anyone." "Sir, I understand this is difficult to process. Can you come in this afternoon? We have some questions, and there are things you need to know." I managed to croak out an agreement before hanging up. The house felt different now, like the walls were closing in. The smell of Ashley's beef stew still wafted from the kitchen, but instead of comfort, it brought nausea. Tom's words echoed in my skull. "By noon today you'll understand." It was 11:45. I sat there in my chair, staring at the framed wedding photo on the side table. Ashley in her white dress, me in my rented tuxedo, both of us so young and full of hope. That was 35 years ago. I thought I knew everything about the woman in that picture. The front door opened and Tom walked in without knocking. His face was grim but no longer panicked. "Bruce," he said quietly, "I'm sorry you had to hear it that way." "You knew," I whispered. "You knew the police were coming for her." He sat down on the couch across from me, his shoulders heavy with some burden I couldn't yet understand. "I called them this morning after I warned you." "Why?" The word came out broken. What could Ashley have possibly done? Tom took a deep breath. 3 days ago, I was working in my garden early in the morning when I saw Ashley leave the house around 6 a.m. She drove to Miller's hardware store and bought a bottle of rat poison, industrial strength. The room started spinning again. "Rat poison? We don't have rats in this neighborhood, Bruce. The houses are too new, too well maintained. I know because I used to be a pest control inspector before I retired. There's no reason anyone on our street would need rat poison." My mouth went dry. Maybe she saw signs of mice or something. Tom shook his head sadly. "That's what I hoped too, so I watched. Yesterday I saw her at Peterson's pharmacy downtown. She spent 45 minutes talking to someone behind the counter, pointing at various bottles." "Talking to who?" I asked around. Turns out Ashley's been building a relationship with one of the younger pharmacists there. A man named David Kellerman, 28 years old, recently divorced. The words hit me like physical blows. Ashley was having an affair. At 62 years old, my wife of 35 years was having an affair with a man young enough to be our son. "How long?" I managed to ask. From what I could piece together, about 3 years. 3 years. I thought about the last 3 years of our marriage. Had there been signs? Late nights when she said she was at book club, shopping trips that lasted longer than they used to, phone calls she took in the other room. Bruce, there's more. Tom's voice was gentle, but each word felt like a knife. I did some digging into David Kellerman's background. His ex-wife filed a restraining order against him last year. Apparently, he convinced her to take out a large life insurance policy, and then she started getting mysteriously sick. Are you saying he's done this before? I'm saying your wife found herself the perfect partner for the perfect crime. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the energy coursing through me. This is insane. Ashley wouldn't kill me for money. We don't even have that much money. Don't you? Tom asked quietly. I stopped pacing. Our savings were modest, maybe $80,000 put away over the years. The house was paid off, worth maybe $250,000 in today's market. My pension and Social Security weren't huge, but they were steady. Your life insurance policy, Bruce. How much is it worth? My heart sank. $500,000. Plus your pension benefits, your Social Security, and a paid-off house. To a 28-year-old pharmacy worker making $30,000 a year, that's a fortune. I felt like I was drowning. How do you know all this? Tom looked uncomfortable. Because I've been watching your house for 3 months. I've been following Ashley when she leaves. I've been documenting everything. Why? I turned to face him. Why would you do that? For the first time since this nightmare began, Tom's composure cracked. His eyes filled with tears and his voice shook when he spoke. Because Ashley isn't my neighbor's wife, Bruce. She's my daughter. The world stopped. Everything stopped. Sound, time, breath, heartbeat. Everything. What? My real name is Thomas Morrison. Ashley is my daughter. The daughter I gave up for adoption when I was 17 years old. I gripped the back of the chair to keep from falling. That's impossible. I moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago specifically to watch her. I wanted to see what kind of life she'd built, what kind of person she'd become. At first I was so proud. She seemed to have everything. A good husband, beautiful children, a nice home. Then why? I couldn't finish the sentence. Then I started noticing things. The way she talked about you when you weren't around. The way she acted when she thought no one was watching. The phone calls she'd take in her car. I realized my daughter had grown into someone I didn't recognize. Tom stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the house where his daughter had lived with me for 3 years while planning my murder. When I saw her buy that poison, I knew I had a choice. I could let her destroy you to protect the secret of who I am, or I could save the life of a decent man who didn't deserve to die. I stared at this man who had just turned my entire world upside down. She's your daughter, and you turned her in? He turned back to me, tears streaming down his weathered face. Bruce, I've been watching you for 3 years too. I've seen how you take care of the elderly woman 2 streets over, bringing her groceries when it snows. I've seen you help the young family next door when their car wouldn't start. I've watched you cry at your kitchen table looking at pictures of your grandchildren. His voice broke completely. Ashley doesn't deserve you. She never did. And I couldn't let her kill the best man in this neighborhood to fund her escape with a manipulative criminal. I sank back into my chair, my mind reeling with this impossible revelation. The man who had saved my life was Ashley's father. The woman who had tried to kill me was the daughter of the man who had saved me. There's something else you need to know, Tom said quietly. The police found letters in Ashley's car, love letters between her and David. They detailed the entire plan. I looked up at him, dreading what was coming next. They were going to make your death look natural. Small doses of poison over several weeks, symptoms that would mimic a heart attack or stroke. After you died, Ashley would wait a respectable amount of time, then move to Florida with David and start a new life with your money. The beef stew was still simmering in the kitchen, filling the house with its rich aroma. The meal Ashley had prepared as my last supper was still cooking, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My marriage was a lie. My wife was a stranger. And the man who saved my life was the father of the woman who had tried to end it. The police station felt like another planet. Detective Chen was a small woman with kind eyes, but her words cut through me like shards of glass. She spread photographs across the table between us. Images of Ashley buying rat poison, meeting with David Kellerman, even pictures of them kissing in the parking lot behind Peterson's pharmacy. Mr. Morrison, I know this is overwhelming, Detective Chen said gently. Take your time to process what you're seeing. I stared at a photograph of my wife in the arms of another man. She was laughing, her head thrown back in pure joy. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her laugh like that with me. Maybe I never had. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Based on the evidence we've gathered, approximately 3 years. The relationship started when Mrs. Morrison began filling a prescription for anxiety medication at Peterson's pharmacy. 3 years. I thought back to when Ashley started taking anxiety medication. She told me she was stressed about our son Michael's divorce, worried about how it was affecting our grandchildren. I'd been supportive, understanding. I'd even suggested she talk to someone professional if the medication wasn't enough. The letters we found in her vehicle detail the progression of their relationship and the planning of your murder, Detective Chen continued. Would you like to read them? I nodded, though every fiber of my being screamed no. She handed me a stack of papers in plastic evidence bags. Ashley's handwriting, the same careful script that had written love notes in my lunchbox for 35 years, now outlined my death. The first letter was dated 8 months ago. David, darling, I've been thinking about what you said. Bruce has been so tired lately, complaining about chest pains. It would be so easy for people to believe his heart just gave out. He's 64, overweight, and his father died young from a heart attack. My hands shook as I read further. The life insurance alone would be enough for us to start over somewhere warm. $500,000, plus I'd inherit everything else. Bruce is so trusting he'd never see it coming. I set the letter down, unable to continue. Did she ever love me? Detective Chen's expression softened. Mr. Morrison, I've seen a lot of marriages destroyed by infidelity and greed. What matters now is that you're safe, and she's going to face justice for what she tried to do. What about my children? Do they know? We haven't contacted them yet. We wanted to speak with you first. The thought of telling Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer that their mother had tried to poison me made me physically ill. How do you explain to your children that the woman who raised them, who kissed their scraped knees and helped with homework, is a would-be murderer? There's something else, Detective Chen said carefully. We've been in contact with authorities in Florida where Mr. Kellerman previously lived. His ex-wife, the one who filed the restraining order, she's agreed to testify about similar attempts on her life. So, this wasn't his first time? We believe Mr. Kellerman has been targeting older women with assets for at least 5 years. Your wife appears to be his most successful recruit. The word recruit hit me like a punch. Ashley hadn't just fallen for a younger man. She'd been recruited into a conspiracy to commit murder. My murder. When I finally left the police station, the sun was setting, and I felt like I'd aged a decade in one afternoon. Tom was waiting for me in my driveway, sitting on the front steps of my house. How did it go? He asked. I sat down beside him, too exhausted to stand. They showed me letters, pictures, everything. I'm sorry, Bruce. I know how hard this must be. We sat in silence for a while, watching the streetlights come on. Finally, I asked the question that had been eating at me since his revelation. Why didn't you ever try to contact Ashley before this? Why wait until now? Tom sighed deeply. I was 17 when Ashley was born. Her mother was 16. We were just kids ourselves, scared and unprepared. My parents forced me to give up all parental rights and never contact the baby again. They said it would be better for everyone, especially the child. Did you ever wonder about her? Every single day for 45 years. When I retired and had time on my hands, I hired a private investigator to find her. When I learned she was married and seemed happy, I thought maybe I could just watch from a distance, see what kind of person my daughter had become. But it didn't turn out the way you hoped. No, it didn't. His voice was heavy with regret. The daughter I'd dreamed about for decades turned out to be someone I couldn't recognize, someone capable of murder for money. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from our oldest son, Michael. Dad, we heard about Mom on the news. What the hell is going on? The news. Of course it would be on the news. Local woman arrested for attempted murder of husband. I could see the headlines already. I have to call my kids, I said, dreading the conversation. Bruce, before you do that, there's something else you should know. I turned to look at him, wondering what other revelation could possibly make this day worse. The letters the police found. Some of them talk about your children. Ashley and David discussed what to do about them after you died. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Ashley was concerned that Michael might contest the will or ask too many questions about your sudden death. David suggested they might need to handle him too if he became a problem. The implication hit me like a freight train. Ashley hadn't just been planning to kill me. She'd been prepared to kill our son if he got in the way of her inheritance. I stood up abruptly, my legs unsteady. I need to call them. I need to warn them. The police already have David in custody, Tom said quickly. Your children are safe now. But were they really? How could I ever feel safe again, knowing that the woman I'd shared a bed with for 35 years had been capable of murdering not just me, but potentially our children too? I called Michael first. The conversation was one of the most difficult of my life. Dad, please tell me this is some kind of mistake, he said, his voice shaky. I wish I could, son, but it's all true. Mom tried to poison you? Yes. Because she's having an affair? Yes. The silence stretched between us for what felt like eternity. Finally, Michael said, Dad, I'm so sorry. Sarah and Jennifer are here with me. We are coming over. You don't have to do that. Yes, we do. You shouldn't be alone right now. When my children arrived an hour later, their faces showed a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. Sarah, my youngest at 28, couldn't stop crying. Jennifer, 32 and always the pragmatist, immediately started asking practical questions about lawyers and court proceedings. But it was Michael, 35 and the oldest, who asked the question that cut deepest. Dad, how did we not see this? How did we not know what kind of person she really was? I looked at my 3 children, all successful adults with families of their own, and realized they were grappling with the same devastating truth I was. The woman we thought we knew had never really existed. The mother they remembered, the wife I'd loved, had been a carefully constructed lie. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know how we missed it. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked up at me. What are you going to do now, Dad? It was a simple question with an impossibly complex answer. What do you do when your entire adult life turns out to have been built on a lie? Where do you go when the person you trusted most in the world tries to murder you? I don't know that either, sweetheart, I said. I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to start over at 64. As my children surrounded me with hugs and promises of support, I caught sight of Tom through the kitchen window. He was in his backyard, tending to his garden in the dark, probably giving us space to process this nightmare as a family. But Tom was family too now, wasn't he? In the strangest possible way, the man who had saved my life had also become the only person who truly understood what I was going through. He'd lost a daughter the same day I'd lost a wife, and somehow in the midst of all this betrayal and pain, we'd found each other. The weeks following Ashley's arrest blurred together in a haze of lawyers, police interviews, and sleepless nights. My children tried their best to support me, but I could see the strain in their faces. They were dealing with their own grief and confusion about their mother, while also worrying about me falling apart completely. And I was falling apart. Every morning I woke up reaching for Ashley's side of the bed, forgetting for just a moment that she wasn't there. Then reality would crash over me like a cold wave, and I'd remember that she'd never really been there at all, not in the way I thought. 3 weeks after her arrest, I finally worked up the courage to go through Ashley's belongings. My children offered to help, but this was something I needed to do alone. I started with her dresser, looking through jewelry boxes and personal items, searching for some clue about who my wife really was. In the back of her jewelry drawer, hidden behind a stack of old birthday cards from the kids, I found a small leather journal. My hands trembled as I opened it, knowing I probably wouldn't like what I found inside. The first entry was dated 5 years ago. Bruce is getting older and more set in his ways. He falls asleep in his chair every night after dinner. Sometimes I watch him snoring and wonder what my life would be like if I'd never married him. My throat tightened as I read on. The children are grown and have their own lives now. They call out of obligation, not love. I feel invisible in my own family, invisible and trapped. I flipped through more pages, watching my wife's handwriting document the slow death of whatever love she'd once felt for me. Bruce gained 20 pounds this year. He doesn't even try to stay attractive anymore. When he touches me, I have to force myself not to pull away. The entries got worse. Much worse. She wrote about fantasizing about my death, about how much easier her life would be if I just disappeared. She calculated my life insurance payout down to the penny and listed all the things she'd do with the money. But it was an entry from 18 months ago that destroyed me completely. Met someone today who made me feel alive for the first time in years. David is everything Bruce isn't. Young, ambitious, passionate. When he looks at me, I remember what it feels like to be desired. I haven't felt this way since I was a teenager. I think I could love him. I slammed the journal shut and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor, pages scattered like dead leaves. For 35 years, I'd been living with a woman who despised me, who fantasized about my death, who felt trapped by our marriage. How had I been so blind? How had I missed every sign, every clue, every moment when her mask slipped? I called Tom that afternoon, needing to talk to the only person who might understand. "I found her journal," I said when he answered. "Oh, Bruce, maybe you shouldn't have read that." "She hated me, Tom. For years, she's hated me. The whole time I thought we had a good marriage, she was fantasizing about my death." "Come over," he said simply. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I walked next door on unsteady legs. Tom's house was smaller than mine, tidy and sparse, the home of a man who'd lived alone for a long time. He made coffee and we sat at his kitchen table while I told him about the journal entries. "She wrote about feeling invisible," I said. "But I never ignored her. I always tried to include her in everything." "Bruce, you can't blame yourself for her choices." "Can't I? What kind of husband was I really? Maybe if I'd been more attentive, more romantic, more exciting." "Stop." Tom's voice was firm. "I've been watching you for 3 years, remember? I've seen how you treated her. You brought her flowers for no reason. You held doors open for her. You asked about her day and actually listened to the answers." I shook my head. It wasn't enough. It was more than enough. Ashley chose to betray you. She chose to plan your murder. Those were her choices, not the result of anything you did or didn't do. But his words didn't ease the crushing weight in my chest. If Ashley had been unhappy for years, if she'd felt trapped and invisible, why hadn't she just asked for a divorce? Why choose murder over simply ending our marriage? The answer came to me with horrible clarity. Money. A divorce would have meant splitting our assets, sharing custody of our future, negotiating and compromising. Murder meant she got everything and started fresh with no obligations to the past. I'd been worth more to her dead than alive. That night I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house Ashley and I had shared, seeing everything differently now. The family photos on the mantel looked fake to me now, like Ashley was acting in every single picture. The furniture we'd picked out together, the paint colors she'd chosen, the garden she'd planted. None of it felt real anymore. I found myself standing in the kitchen where she'd been preparing my final meal when the police arrested her. The pot was still on the stove, the beef stew now moldy and rotten. It seemed fitting somehow. My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Sarah, my youngest daughter. "Dad, I can't sleep either," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I keep thinking about all the times Mom hugged me, told me she loved me, helped me with problems. Was any of it real?" "I don't know, sweetheart. How do we trust anyone ever again after this? How do we believe that love is real when the person we thought loved us most was planning to kill you?" It was a question I'd been asking myself every hour since Ashley's arrest. How do you rebuild faith in human nature when the person closest to you turns out to be a stranger capable of murder? "I don't have an answer for that," I admitted. "I wish I did." "Dad, are you going to be okay? Really okay, I mean?" I looked around the dark house, filled with memories that now felt poisoned. "I honestly don't know, Sarah. Some days I'm not sure I want to be." The admission slipped out before I could stop it. I heard her sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Dad, don't say that. Please don't say that." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." "Are you thinking about hurting yourself?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Was I? In the darkest moments when the pain felt unbearable and the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole, had I considered it? Sometimes I just don't see the point in starting over at 64, I said carefully. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Everything I built was based on someone else's deception. Dad, please come stay with Michael and me for a while. Don't be alone in that house. I need to be here, Sarah. I need to figure out what comes next. After we hung up, I sat in my recliner and stared at the ceiling. What did come next? I was 64 years old, about to be divorced, with a life story that sounded like something from a made-for-TV movie. Who would want to start a friendship or relationship with a man whose wife had tried to poison him? The loneliness was suffocating. For 35 years, Ashley had been my companion, my confidant, my closest friend. Even if it had all been an act on her part, it had been real for me. I'd shared every thought, every hope, every fear with someone who secretly despised me. How do you recover from that kind of betrayal? How do you learn to trust again when the person you trusted most in the world was your would-be murderer? I closed my eyes and tried to imagine a future. Maybe I'd sell the house and move somewhere new. Maybe I'd travel, see the places Ashley and I had talked about visiting but never did. Maybe I'd find some kind of peace in solitude. But peace felt impossible when every memory was now suspect. Had Ashley really enjoyed our anniversary dinners, or had she been fantasizing about my death while we toasted our marriage? Had she meant it when she said she was proud of me, or had those words been carefully chosen manipulations designed to keep me compliant and unsuspecting? A soft knock at the front door interrupted my spiral into despair. It was 3:30 in the morning. Who would be knocking at this hour? I opened the door to find Tom standing there in his pajamas and robe, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "Saw your lights on," he said simply. "Figured you could use some company." As I looked at this man who had saved my life, who had sacrificed his own daughter to protect me, who had become the only person who truly understood my pain, I felt the first spark of something that wasn't despair. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe somehow there was still hope for redemption in this nightmare. Tom's presence at my door at 3:30 in the morning became the turning point I didn't know I needed. We sat in my living room, sipping tea in comfortable silence, and for the first time since Ashley's arrest, I didn't feel completely alone with my pain. "I've been thinking about something," Tom said eventually. "About what you said on the phone earlier, about not seeing the point in starting over at 64. I set down my cup, not sure I was ready for another difficult conversation. "I felt the same way when my wife died 8 years ago," he continued. "We'd been married for 42 years. Cancer took her slowly, and by the end I was exhausted from watching her suffer. But after she died, the silence in the house was unbearable." I looked at him with new understanding. "You've been alone? For 8 years?" "Yes and no. I chose to be alone because I thought that was what grief required. But loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing, Bruce. Loneliness is what you're feeling right now. The sense that nobody understands what you're going through. Solitude is what I chose. The peace of being by yourself without feeling abandoned." His words resonated deeper than I expected. How do you get from one to the other? You start by accepting that your old life is over. Completely over. And then you decide whether you want to build a new one. Over the following days, Tom became my lifeline. He'd appear at my door each morning with coffee and the newspaper, and we'd sit on my porch discussing everything except Ashley and the trial preparations. He told me about his career as a pest control inspector, about the places he'd traveled with his late wife, about the hobbies he'd taken up since retiring. "What did you do before Ashley?" he asked one morning. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, who were you before you became half of a couple? What did you enjoy doing when you were single?" I realized I couldn't answer. I'd met Ashley when I was 29, already set in my ways and focused on building a career. I'd never really explored who I was as an individual adult. "I don't remember," I admitted. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Tom suggested I see a therapist, someone who specialized in trauma recovery. I resisted at first. The idea of discussing my feelings with a stranger felt overwhelming. But the nightmares were getting worse, and some days I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. Dr. Patricia Williams was nothing like I expected. She was probably my age with gray hair and laugh lines, and she had a way of asking questions that didn't feel intrusive. "Bruce, you've survived something that would devastate anyone," she said during our first session. "The fact that you're here talking about it shows incredible strength." "I don't feel strong. I feel like a fool who was too stupid to see what was right in front of him. Let me ask you something. If a friend came to you and said his wife of 35 years had been planning to kill him, would you call him a fool?" I thought about it. "No, I'd be horrified for him." "Then why are you treating yourself with less compassion than you'd show a friend?" It was a simple question that unlocked something I'd been struggling with. I'd been blaming myself for Ashley's betrayal, as if I should have somehow sensed her murderous intentions. Dr. Williams helped me understand that trust isn't a weakness, and that Ashley's ability to deceive me for decades spoke to her skill at manipulation, not my failure as a husband. The therapy sessions became a refuge. For 50 minutes each week, I could explore my feelings without judgment, without having to comfort anyone else or pretend to be stronger than I felt. "I keep wondering if I ever really knew her at all," I told Dr. Williams during our fourth session. "Were there any genuine moments in 35 years, or was everything an act?" "What does your heart tell you?" "My heart tells me that some of it had to be real. The way she cried when our grandson was born, the way she held me when my mother died, those reactions felt genuine." "Then trust that. People are complex, Bruce. Ashley was capable of both genuine emotion and calculated deception. The fact that she could love your children while planning to kill you doesn't make the love less real. It makes her more dangerous." As the weeks passed, I started venturing out of the house more. Tom and I began taking daily walks around the neighborhood, and slowly I stopped feeling like everyone was staring at me or whispering about the man whose wife tried to poison him. One afternoon, about 2 months after Ashley's arrest, Tom made an unexpected suggestion. "I'm thinking about moving," he said as we sat on my porch. "This house, this neighborhood, it's too full of complicated memories for both of us." My stomach dropped. Tom had become my anchor, the one person who understood what I was going through. The thought of losing him felt devastating. "Where would you go?" I managed to ask. "I've been looking at retirement communities in North Carolina, mountain towns, places where people go to start fresh. Clean air, friendly neighbors, a lower cost of living." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Of course he'd want to leave. Why would he want to stay in the neighborhood where his daughter had committed such terrible crimes? "The thing is," Tom continued, "I don't really want to start over completely alone. I was wondering if you might be interested in a change of scenery too." I stared at him. "You're asking me to move with you?" "I'm asking if you'd like to consider it. We could each get our own place, but maybe in the same area. We've become good friends, Bruce. Real friends. And I think we could both benefit from a fresh start somewhere new." The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Leaving everything behind felt like running away, but staying felt like drowning in poisoned memories. "I don't know," I said honestly. "This is my home. My children are here." "Your children are adults with their own lives. They love you, but they don't need you to stay in this house to maintain those relationships." That evening, I called each of my children to discuss Tom's proposal. Their reaction surprised me. "Dad, I think that sounds wonderful," Sarah said immediately. "You need to get away from that house, away from all the reminders." Michael was more cautious. "Are you sure about this, Tom guy? I mean, he is Ashley's father." "He's the man who saved my life, Michael. If it weren't for him, you'd be planning my funeral right now." Jennifer, ever practical, asked the important questions. "What about money? Can you afford to relocate? What about your medical care?" I realized I hadn't thought through the practical aspects. Ashley and I had been comfortable but not wealthy. The legal fees from her case were mounting, and I had no idea how much a fresh start would actually cost. The next day I made an appointment with my financial advisor. The conversation was eye-opening. "Your situation is actually more stable than you might think," he explained. "With Ashley in prison, you're not responsible for her legal fees. The house is in both your names, but given the circumstances, you should be able to sell it and keep the entire proceeds. Your pension and social security will transfer anywhere in the country. He helped me run the numbers. After selling the house and paying off the remaining legal costs, I'd have enough to buy a modest home somewhere less expensive and maintain my current standard of living. For the first time in months, I felt something that might have been excitement. That night, I found myself standing in the kitchen where Ashley had prepared my last meal. And instead of feeling sick, I felt determined. This house wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene. These walls held 35 years of memories, but now I knew that many of those memories were lies. I walked through each room, mentally cataloging what I wanted to keep and what I was ready to leave behind. The furniture Ashley and I had chosen together could stay with the house. The family photos would come with me, but I'd frame new ones featuring the people who truly loved me. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I opened the closet and began sorting through Ashley's belongings. Her clothes still hung there, still smelled like her perfume. For a moment, the familiar scent brought back memories of better times, and I felt a stab of grief for the woman I thought I'd married. But then I remembered her journal entries, her letters to David, her plans for my murder, and the grief transformed into something cleaner. Acceptance. Ashley Morrison, the woman I'd loved for 35 years, had never really existed. She'd been a carefully constructed character designed to keep me compliant and unsuspecting while she lived her real life in secret. I couldn't mourn someone who had never been real, but I could build a new life with people who were. I picked up my phone and called Tom. "I've made a decision," I said when he answered. "Let's start looking at places in North Carolina." His relief was audible. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure. It's time to find out who Bruce Morrison is when he's not being manipulated and deceived." "Bruce," Tom said quietly, "I think you're going to like the man you discover." For the first time in months, I thought he might be right. 3 years have passed since that February morning when Tom knocked on my door and saved my life. As I sit on the porch of my small cabin in Asheville, North Carolina, watching the morning mist rise off the Blue Ridge Mountains, I can barely recognize the broken man I used to be. The transition wasn't easy. Selling the house in Michigan took 6 months, partly because of the media attention Ashley's case had generated. Local woman attempts to poison husband had been front-page news for weeks, and potential buyers were either morbidly curious or completely uninterested in purchasing a house with such dark history. But eventually a young family bought it, planning to renovate completely and make it their own. I was glad it would become something new, something untainted by the lies that had lived within those walls. Tom and I found houses just 2 streets apart in a quiet retirement community outside Asheville. His place is slightly larger, with a workshop where he's taken up woodworking. Mine is smaller but perfect for my needs, with a wraparound porch where I spend most of my mornings reading and watching the world wake up. The first year was the hardest. Ashley's trial lasted 8 months, and I had to testify about our marriage, about the lies I'd lived with unknowingly. Facing her in that courtroom was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. She sat at the defendant's table, looking older, smaller, nothing like the woman who had shared my bed and planned my death. Her lawyer tried to paint me as an inattentive husband who had driven his client to desperation. They suggested Ashley had been suffering from some kind of mental breakdown, that her actions were those of a woman crying out for help, rather than a calculated murderer. But the evidence was overwhelming. The letters between Ashley and David Kellerman detailed every aspect of their plan. The poison purchases, the timeline for my death, even their discussions about where to honeymoon after they inherited my money. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Ashley was sentenced to 25 years to life for attempted murder and conspiracy. David received a similar sentence. At 62, Ashley will likely spend the rest of her life in prison. I felt no satisfaction when the verdict was read, only a profound sadness for the waste of it all. 35 years of marriage, 3 children who had lost their mother to her own choices, and a life that had been built on deception from the very beginning. My children struggled with the aftermath more than I did. Sarah went through a period where she questioned every relationship in her life, unable to trust her own judgment about people's motives. Michael threw himself into work, avoiding any conversation about emotions or family. Jennifer, always the most practical, focused on helping me transition to my new life but refused to discuss her own feelings about what had happened. It took family therapy, all of us together, to begin healing those wounds. Dr. Williams referred us to a specialist in North Carolina, and for months we met every other Saturday to process the trauma Ashley had inflicted on all of us. Your mother's choices weren't a reflection of your worth as children, the therapist reminded my kids repeatedly. And they weren't a reflection of your father's worth as a husband. Some people are capable of compartmentalizing love and cruelty in ways that seem impossible to understand. Slowly, gradually, we began to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty rather than obligation. My children visit me regularly now, and our conversations are deeper, more authentic than they'd been in years. We don't pretend everything is fine, and we don't avoid difficult topics. We've learned that real love can withstand truth, even when that truth is painful. Tom became the brother I never had. We take daily walks through the mountain trails, play chess in the evenings, and cook dinner for each other when one of us doesn't feel like being alone. He taught me to garden, something Ashley had always insisted on doing herself, and I discovered I have a natural talent for growing tomatoes and herbs. But the most unexpected gift of this new life came 18 months after we moved to North Carolina. I was at the grocery store struggling to reach a can of soup on the top shelf when a voice behind me said, "Here, let me help you with that." I turned to find a woman about my age with silver hair and kind eyes, easily reaching the can I'd been stretching for. She handed it to me with a smile. "Thank you," I said. "I used to be taller, I swear." She laughed, a warm sound that made something in my chest flutter. "We all used to be a lot of things. I'm Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie." "Bruce Morrison, new to the area." I figured. I would have remembered touching you around. "Welcome to Asheville." There was something about her that immediately put me at ease. Maybe it was the way she looked directly at me when she spoke, or the fact that her smile seemed genuinely interested, rather than politely distant. "Are you settling in okay?" she asked as we walked toward the checkout lanes. "Better than I expected. It's a beautiful area." "It is. Perfect for starting over if that's what you're looking for." The phrase caught my attention. "How did you know that's what I was doing?" "Because that's what I'm doing too. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and I finally decided it was time to stop living in the past and figure out what the future looks like." Over the following weeks, Maggie and I began running into each other regularly. At the library where we both volunteered. At the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. At the community center where senior citizens gathered for various activities. Tom noticed the change in my demeanor before I did. "You're humming," he observed one morning as I made coffee. "Am I?" "You've been humming for 3 days. Also, you bought new shirts and you are shaving more carefully." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Don't read too much into it." "Bruce, there's nothing wrong with being interested in someone. You're allowed to be happy." The idea of romantic happiness felt foreign after everything I'd been through with Ashley. How could I trust my judgment about women when I'd been so completely deceived for 35 years? Dr. Williams, who I still saw monthly for maintenance sessions, helped me work through these fears. "Bruce, what happened with Ashley wasn't about your inability to judge character. It was about her exceptional ability to deceive. Those are very different things. But what if I'm wrong again? What if I'm just a mark for women who see an easy target? Then you'll deal with that if it happens, but you can't let Ashley's betrayal prevent you from ever trusting again. That would mean she won, even from prison." It took 6 months of friendship before I worked up the courage to ask Maggie to dinner. We went to a small Italian restaurant in downtown Asheville, and I was so nervous I could barely eat. "Bruce," she said halfway through the meal, "you seem like you're waiting for bad news. Is everything okay?" I set down my fork and made a decision to be honest. "I'm out of practice at this. My marriage ended badly, and I haven't dated anyone in 36 years. "How badly did it end?" I took a deep breath. "My wife tried to poison me." Maggie's eyes widened, but she didn't pull back or make excuses to leave. That must have been terrifying. It was, but it also taught me something important about the difference between love and manipulation. Which is? Love doesn't require you to be blind. Real love thrives on honesty, even when the truth is difficult. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'd like to hear that story sometime if you're willing to share it." And slowly, carefully, I told her everything. About Ashley's betrayal, about Tom's rescue, about the trial and the therapy and the long journey to rebuild my sense of self. Maggie listened without judgment, asking gentle questions and offering comfort when the memories became painful. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said finally. "I can see why you'd be cautious about relationships. Are you running for the hills yet?" She smiled. "Actually, I'm impressed. You survived something that would have destroyed a lot of people, and you came through it with your capacity for trust intact. That takes incredible strength." That dinner was the beginning of something I never thought I'd have again. A relationship based on complete honesty. Maggie and I took things slowly, building friendship first and letting romance develop naturally. She met Tom and my children. I met her daughter who lived in Charlotte, and gradually we created a small but loving, chosen family. 6 months ago, on a crisp October morning, Maggie and I were married in a small ceremony on Tom's back deck. My children were there, along with Maggie's daughter and her grandchildren. Tom officiated. He'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, completely happy. As I write this, Maggie is in the kitchen making her famous blueberry pancakes while Tom putters in his workshop next door. My phone has messages from my children, checking in not out of worry but out of genuine care. In an hour, Maggie and I will drive to the farmer's market, then spend the afternoon hiking one of the easier mountain trails. It's a quiet life, a simple life, but it's mine. Built on truth instead of lies, supported by people who know my worst moments and choose to love me anyway. Ashley took 35 years of my life through deception and betrayal. But in losing that false life, I found something more valuable. The courage to build a real one. Sometimes I wonder if Ashley ever thinks about what she threw away when she chose murder over honesty. If she realizes that she could have simply asked for a divorce and found her own happiness without destroying so many lives. But those thoughts don't linger long. Ashley belongs to the past, and the past is not where I live anymore. I live here in this moment, in this mountain cabin filled with genuine love and honest companionship. I live in tomorrow's possibilities, in next week's plans, in next year's dreams. At 67 years old, I learned something I wish I'd known decades ago. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to choose authenticity over convenience, truth over comfort, real love over familiar lies. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you'll get a second chance to build the life you never knew you wanted. That knock on my door at 5 a.m. saved more than my life. It saved my soul.